And we are live. Thanks everybody for coming back, checking out the Church of Latter-day Saints, coming back again. Thank you guys for coming back, Elder Murray, Elder Lance. They're sitting in the right position today. Last week I was kind of getting them mixed up there. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the Book of Mormon, of course, and their doctrines and teachings. And I even brought out my own books that I got years and years and years ago. So before we get on any further on that, in the ending there, I kind of want a different church. I wanted like the actual church in Utah. That's what I wanted. I don't know what that is, but it's not big enough, I think. So, how are you guys? You guys good?
We're doing great.
Blessings. Yep. Great. All right. I'm just going to go over real quick what we were kind of talking about backstage here. So years and years ago, I'm the kind of person that I just like talking to people. I like learning different things. So years and years ago, when Mormons or Jehovah's Witnesses came to my door, I never turned them away. And in return, I got some books here. And I told these guys last week that I was going to dig around a little bit, try to find them books. And, well, I did. And in those books, I had bookmarkers throughout the books and found little notes from 20 years ago, which I think is really cool. So today's lesson is basically going to be over them notes, which I read off a couple of them notes to these guys, and it sounds like there's a lot of information packed in with each of these questions. So we'll hope that we'll learn you today. We'll hope that we'll learn you today. So let's go with this first one. And I don't know. I believe it is the Book of Mormon, but Mosiah. All right. Let's go to Mosiah 2:4 and talk about what that says a little bit.
Let's do it.
I'm curious if any of this will ring a bell. And if I go off camera at all, I'm taking bites of food. That's all it is. I'm not like.
All good.
All right.
You gotta do.
There you go.
Mosiah 2:4. There we go. Okay. Yeah, should we read it and then just ask about it or talk about it?
Yeah.
All right, sweet. I'll read it. It says, and also that they might give thanks to the Lord their God, who had brought them out of the. Actually, we should probably give a little context about what this is talking about.
Okay.
It might make a little more sense as that just put together in my head.
All right. Yeah, let's do that.
So above all the chapters, it's kind of cool. It has like a little, I don't know what you'd call it, like a preface, basically. It just runs down what the chapter is. So what it's talking about right now is King Benjamin. He's a good king over these people. And he is giving a huge proclamation to the people. And he's telling them, all of these things. You might be able to describe King Benjamin better to me, but he's giving advice and prophesying to the people.
Yeah, so King Benjamin, he's a really righteous king. He's a good king, and he's a king over a righteous nation too. So they're prospering, they're doing very well. And so his dad before him was a really good example on what a king should be for the people. And how to grow and cultivate a good, strong nation without being unjust and everything. And so King Noah in the Book of Mormon King Benjamin is known throughout the Book of Mormon as a really righteous and a wise king. And so he gives really sort of two main sort of teachings. He gathers all the people together. He's like, I want to give a proclamation to everybody. And he does it twice. And this is one of his first ones that he gives to the people. And so this is really one of the stuff, a part of what he says to the people, right, as they gather together to hear what the king has to say over the nation.
His proclamation is 4 or 5 chapters or something like that.
Mhm.
So,
Okay.
and then this is like to everyone. He's on this big, huge tower, and he's like yelling this to like everyone. And so it's like a big deal. Like everyone's gathered for this. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. 2, 4. All right. And it says, and also that they might give thanks to the Lord their God, who had brought them out of their land of Jerusalem, and who had delivered them out of the hands of their enemies, and had appointed just men to be their teachers, and also a just man to be their king, who had established peace in the land of Zarahemla, and who had taught them to keep commandments of God, that they might rejoice and be filled with love towards God and all men. So, I mean, what he's basically talking a little bit about history from where his people came from, and he starts to talk about like the kind of teachers and the kind of men that have guided them, because as I think that the Book of Mormon is about the saints in America,
Right.
because they didn't just start in America, they came from Jerusalem, and so it starts off by talking about that when it says, the Lord their God, who had brought them out of the land of Jerusalem and delivered them out of the hands of their enemies, because they're being prosecuted for their teachings there in Jerusalem, and they left Jerusalem to come to the Americas. Was that something you already knew?
No, I didn't. So you're saying, but when was this? What's the time frame on this? When was King Benjamin?
It's 124 BC.
124 BC, before Christ. So even before the Roman Empire? Well, around the Roman Empire. Yeah. In the middle of the Roman Empire, essentially.
Yeah, they might have just been starting to build up their empire and started to take a little bit of control. But yeah,
So you're saying that Jews during the Roman Empire found America? That's interesting. No, that's it. I've heard of this theory before, but with a group called the Black Hebrew Israelites, and they believe that they were here with the Native Americans before the Europeans even came over. So I'm listening, and I'm just kind of, it's very interesting. So okay, so they came over here during the middle of the Roman Empire, essentially. That's pretty interesting. Okay, go ahead. I just wanted to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's super interesting, right? Like a lot of people don't really follow that, but that's sort of where the Book of Mormon starts. It starts back in Jerusalem with a prophet called Lehi, and he describes all these visions and dreams that he has, and visitations from angels that say essentially, hey, Jerusalem is a wicked nation. You and your family will be dragged down to wickedness if you stay here. There's going to be destruction and whatnot. You guys have to get out. And so that's sort of how the Book of Mormon starts. And so they let Lehi, this prophet, takes his family out of Jerusalem, right? And he follows where God's taking him to be, and he takes him to the ocean, right? And they all initially think, oh, this is it. We're done. We made it where we're supposed to be. This is the promised land that God has set up for them. And they start like pitching their tents. And then all of a sudden he has another vision, right? And God's like, actually, you got to go across the water.
You're gonna cross that. Yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna cross it, and you got to think about that. It's like these guys have literally only seen desert their entire lives. They have only lived in the middle of a desert in the Middle East in Jerusalem for forever now, and now all of a sudden they're like, you got to build a boat and cross an ocean, and they're like, we're not seamen, we're not sailors, we don't know how to build a boat and do all this stuff. But God was like, hey, it's okay. With me, you can accomplish all things. And so that's what they do. They rely on God. He strengthens them.
I feel like this prophet has lost it.
Right. A lot of people were thinking he's crazy. Even his own sons were saying that, right? He had two faithful sons that are like, okay, if you say we got to build a boat, Dad, we'll build a boat. And so they go about doing it. And then the two oldest sons are like, you're crazy. We're not going to cross an ocean. That's not something we can do. But he kept saying, if God has commanded it of us, we have to do it. And so that's what they did. They built that boat. They crossed the sea. And then they set up here. And what I love about this verse in particular, in verse 4, is that it says, and he had appointed just men to be their teachers, a just man to be their king, established peace in the land. And that part I love so much, because it's like, it's the same, right? The same way that Christ had organized his church, even in like Moses' time. Like in Moses' time, God said, you have to call men beneath you. You have to call priests and teachers. Like for every 50 men, you need a teacher. For every 100 men, that's a priest. And so God was saying, here's how you organize your church. And even here, it's saying the same thing, that even what they were doing back there, it was the same setup over here in the Americas. It was like, we're going to set up teachers. We're going to set up a king. Like, here's how we're going to establish it in a similar manner.
So is this like the beginning of the restoration?
In a sense, I guess it's more like what came from the restoration, I'd say.
Okay.
Because it, like, the teachings in this book, we believe, are just what the Bible doesn't have in it, because it's not the same testament. Just the same as like the Old Testament doesn't cover the same as the New Testament. This is just another testament. And, you know, like the whole, that's like what the, before, like Mosiah has covered in 1st and 2nd Nephi. That's what it's telling of, is, you know, these people crossing through the wilderness with their family, having these trials, getting to the Americas, and then growing in the Americas. And eventually what happens near the end of the book in 3rd Nephi is Christ comes to the Americas. And that's where people get that belief, and that, oh, Mormons have a different Jesus, because we believe that Jesus Christ didn't just, you know, he wasn't just resurrected in, you know, the Middle East with you know, in the places there, but he came to the Americas as well, because he cares about all of his children. I believe he came down and he taught his gospel just as he did to everywhere else in the world.
No, that makes sense, right? Because I mean, if you're, you know, if you believe that Jesus is God the Father, then yeah, he would come and visit all of his children, not just one geographical location. You know, he would want that bridge in all cultures, connections, peoples, and civilizations,
Right.
not just in Jerusalem. In fact, a lot of people would argue that Jesus was not for Jerusalem in the first place, but for the Gentiles. So that's everywhere outside of Judah.
Right. Yeah. What's so cool is that you read in the New Testament, right? In some of the Gospels, when Christ does come back, you know, he's resurrected, he comes back, he talks with his apostles, and he's saying, he's like, I can't stay here with you guys too long. I have other sheep I have to go tend to. I have a flock of sheep that's not of this fold. They're not here. And I love that so much, because that makes sense to me. It's like, why would Christ, after being resurrected, only reveal himself again, right, to his apostles and to the people there in Judah and Jerusalem and those places? He's saying, I have other sheep I have to go tend to, right? I have another fold I have to go tend to. And to me, that just lines up perfectly with the Book of Mormon. It's like, because after he did that, after he visited with the apostles, what did he do? He came and he appeared in the Americas, right? He's like, okay, here's those other sheep I was talking about. Here's that other fold. Now I got to help you guys and strengthen you guys and teach you guys those things. So that's what I find super awesome about that connection right there, is that it's like, Christ is definitely like, I'm not just going to stick around here. I want to help everybody. I have other sheep. And what does he do? He goes to the Americas. You see him in the Book of Mormon and doing that, exactly what he said he's going to do.
Yeah, the question comes to my mind that, and I always go here with this because I just try to find an explanation with it, but it's an interesting one. So, like, you have to ask yourself, right, if Jesus came here to Americas, you know, you would think that there would be some documentation with, like, the Native Americans, or, you know, or even like down in Mexico, the Aztecs, the Incas, and what have you, you know. But instead they have this in Egypt, they have this in, you know, places like Russia and Europe, all over, Britain, Africa even, where there is like carvings and rocks or hieroglyphs or writings of like a god coming from a sky type deal. And you have to, again, you always see the paintings, Jesus coming from the clouds, descending, if you will. And you got to wonder if that is the depiction of, a lot of people would call them like the star people, but even we refer to the stars as the heavens.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think about that? It is kind of, it's just an interesting.
For sure. And there's a lot of people out there. I know a lot of people personally that they're like, okay, if the Book of Mormon's true, right, you're saying it happened in the Americas, there's got to be some evidence. And they start to dig super deep and like,
sure,
well, this like goes against that, and this does support it, but like it's missing this little element, and they go dig into all that stuff. And there's a lot that, and I'm sure people who've actually studied that specifically, because I believe there are people who have studied that specifically, know a lot more than I think I will, and dare say Elder Murray will know. But I think for me, one of the best ways I like to think about it is towards the end, at the end of the Book of Mormon, right at the end in the last few chapters, it's known as sort of the war chapters, because essentially you have these two nations. It's known as the Nephites and the Lamanites. And towards the very end, they become super forgetful of everything that their fathers taught them, and they become super wicked again. And what happens is they both go into war, and ultimately one group absolutely ends up destroying one nation. None of them remain. And the only thing that's left is a very extremely wicked nation of people who've never really truly developed. And you'll read and you read about throughout the book is that these Nephites, they built armor, they had swords and stuff, but the Lamanites, they were very primitive. They just had like loincloths and slings and clubs and all these things. And so at the end, these Lamanites eventually take over and like kill them off. And they're super wicked, and they forget God. They forget everything they've been taught. But that war knocked out most of the people, but there was still some of those Lamanites, those sort of primitive people left around. And so for me, that's the main bridge that I can sort of
bless you.
That's the main bridge that I can sort of see in that connection of like that remaining evidence, right? And that you do see some of those tribes, right, in early America, right, where you had those primitive tribes around. I don't know. Do you have anything of that connective evidence?
I know there are, like, it is really interesting. Like the more you look into it, like some of the evidence that they found, like in like Ohio and like some of the places like in the Americas of what they would attest to as Native American or tribes, because even like a lot of these tribes like the Maya or the Inca, there's not a whole lot of evidence like following them that's even what they refer to themselves as. And so a lot of it is like, this is this group of people, but the connection, whether or not it was Nephites and Lamanites or other tribes, is kind of lost. It's just from what we know. And it's crazy. Like the more you look into the geographical research that they've put into finding evidence and stuff in the like South America, like it's really slim how much they've really searched and how much they really know about it. Like even the people who like have put their whole life, they're like, there's so much more, because there's just so much land and so much time between then and there. But I think there is a lot of evidence, but it's attested to, maybe different groups of people. Mm-hmm. And it just, there's not a whole lot of proof that says, oh, this was the Nephites. This is what the Book of Mormon talks about. But we know for a fact that there was people in the Americas a long time ago. And it's more about like, who were those people? And it's interesting. We talked about last week with Joseph Smith, like preaching to the Native Americans a little bit.
Yeah.
And, there are people who I know who've served in like missions where they live on like the Navajo reservations and stuff.
Yeah.
And some of the stories they teach are stories that they've already heard about in the Book of Mormon, because they're like, oh, we've heard like stuff like this from like our fathers and whatnot, but
really
first time I'm ever hearing about the Book of Mormon, just because people were here, but they don't continue with the name of Lamanite.
Sure. So maybe what you're getting at is that the best evidence there is to reference is oral tradition, right? Stories that were passed down from generation to generation.
Mm-hmm.
So the best evidence you have is through oral tradition of telling stories.
Yeah, I think so. If I find the video again, I'll definitely send it your way. But in this video that I saw one time, it basically described that when the Book of Mormon first came about, there was a spike in sort of like evidences that disproved it, or the claims that like were against it.
Sure.
But then throughout the years, what they noticed is that throughout more and more time, those evidences became to be disproved and disproved and disproved until it like shrunk away, while there just grew more and more evidence that supported it. And I wish I knew all of those off the top of my head, and I really don't know too much. But if I do find that video, I'll send it over your way, because I think you'd enjoy that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Real quick, and then we'll get. I just remembered. So last week we talked a little bit about the Mormons in Mexico.
Yeah.
And so I did find a backstory on how they got there, and don't think, don't get uncomfortable. But so they were a part of the church, but are not now. But they still refer to themselves as Mormons, because that's where they came from. And it's a big ranch down there, farm. It's called the LeBaron's Farm. And these people had 50 kids, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of grandkids, and they were all gangster. I mean, if you read the story of the background of them, they have their own cemetery, and they literally fought the cartel like bone and blood. I mean, these guys were like professional hitmen, snipers. They were Mormon. The reason they went down there is because when the United States made the law that polygamy is now illegal, that was a fundamental thing in the Mormon church, and they wanted to continue to practice that. So they, a branch or a sect of the church followed the LeBaron guy and another guy down to Mexico, where they were still able to perform polygamy and other traditional Mormon values and beliefs. So that's how they got down there. But if you look it up, these people are gangsta. These people are like for real. It's crazy. It's crazy.
I gotta look into that.
Yeah. So if you want to go to YouTube Vice News, just look up Mormons in Mexico, and it will pop right up. And yeah, Vice News. It's about 45 minutes to an hour long, but it gives you all kinds of. Yeah, it is. It's crazy. So yeah, you guys don't even know how gangster you are.
I have no clue.
You can tell your elders about those guys.
Yeah,
they'd be really impressed. They'd be telling you stories, when I was young, it was
yeah, right.
All right. So I'm just going to go right down the list here, even though it might not make coherent sense, or the timeline or the place of the story might be all over. You guys, I'm sure, will do a great job of fixing the gaps, if you will. So let's talk. You mentioned just a little bit ago about the Lamanites and the Nephilites, right? Did I get that right?
Lamanites, Nephites, yeah.
Okay. Well, my dialect is a little off. All right. So we're gonna go. Tell us about the story of the Nephilites. And I'm still saying it wrong, I know, but just work with me here.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Yeah. So the Nephites, I mean, that takes us back to that sort of beginning story that we said, right? As I mentioned, that dad who took his family out of Jerusalem, Lehi, he had 4 sons initially. He had Laman and Lemuel, and then Nephi and Sam were the younger two. Nephi actually being the youngest. And so Laman and Lemuel, that's where you get sort of the name Lamanites after Laman, right? And then you get Nephites after Nephi. So after they had landed, right, in this new land, Nephi was always trying to do what God said. He was always trying to follow God's will and whatever he was asking of him. Laman and Lemuel, they were kind of a bit more rebellious. They were like, hey, we built this house by our own two hands. It's all on us. It's all manpower, right? Instead of recognizing God power, right? And there's a huge difference, and there's a lot of problems.
I was gonna say it sounds like the guys in Mexico.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Exactly. Manpower over God power.
Right.
And so essentially what happened was Laman and Lemuel, they started to get fearful of Nephi. One, they were a little bit jealous that God was talking to him more, but that was only because Nephi was actually following what God asked of him. And so Laman and Lemuel, they became like so wicked that God was actually fearful that Laman and Lemuel and their families and their descendants were actually going to attack Nephi and his descendants. And so God told Nephi, right, take your people and take the ones that want to follow God and go up north, right, and build a city there, and that's where you guys will be. And so that's what they did.
Where's north? Where is north at this point?
So I wish I knew exactly where they landed, and
okay.
And where all we know.
Do we know where they were? Do we know where they were?
I wish I had a strong answer on that. I know some people actually. I think some people actually have a better roundabout area of where they landed. But the best that I can do is just know relatively to each other and where they landed, where it all was. Awesome. And so for what we know is that the Nephites, right, they moved upward, right, into the wilderness up there, and the Lamanites, they sort of stayed where they landed. And they kind of continued there on their own for the most part. The Lamanites every now and then were like, okay, we have to attack the Nephites because they were afraid the Nephites would attack them. And so basically what happened was there's a series of sort of battles moving back and forth where the Nephites just really wanted to maintain their own separation. They just wanted to be their own entity. But the Lamanites were kind of afraid of them and everything that they were doing. So every now and then you'd see a war break out and stuff like that. But throughout time, right, some of those Nephites up top, they're like, you know what? We want to check out what's going down below, because there was a couple period of times of peace. And so they're like, what's going on down below with the Lamanites? And so they sent out some parties to go and explore down there, ultimately leading to their capture. And then the Lamanites sort of like held them captive for a little bit. And it wasn't until a couple years later where another like search party went out to say, hey, what happened to that first search party? So that second search party was able to find them, bring them back, and for the longest time they lived on their own. And then there's throughout the Book of Mormon, you read of all the teachings that went on in sort of each people, the teachings that happened in the Nephites, the teachings that happened with the Lamanites, and how they turned to God in some moments, and how in some moments they turned away from God, and what that did for them. But ultimately, like towards the end, right, those wars break out. And they start to just essentially kill each other off. But the main purpose of like these two nations, right, the Nephites and the Lamanites, is the whole purpose is to learn from their mistakes, learn from what the scriptures say about them, what they experienced, you can apply to our own lives, and that's what's most incredible about these two nations.
Do you guys have a pen and paper on you?
Yes, I do. Yep.
Yeah. Elder Murray on point.
Yes, sir.
Write me a note, and I wrote a note down here too. Where is north? Where is north? Where are they at in the Storia? And where is north? Even if we knew like the general area that they were at, we would know the general area that they went to. If they say we went, north, you know what I mean? So even just to find out the general area that they were at.
Mm-hmm. And I know there are. If we look it up, I know we can. I think find roughly, because
a rough roundabout.
If you come to the Americas from Jerusalem by ship, you're not going to end up in certain parts of like there.
Right. I get that.
I know a lot of like it was Central and South America at times, like where they were, and they eventually moved up more and more north. But that's what I want to say is it was around in like the Central and South America region. But then again, I don't know that for certain.
Okay. No, that's no problem. I just kind of want to.
Yeah, for sure.
Get like a migration type deal, like it just helps the story a little bit better,
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and throughout the whole Book of Mormon, they keep saying, "Oh, this city is this direction relative to this one," and so it's like if you knew that first, like if you knew at least a general landing spot area, you could kind of build a rough map that would actually be pretty decent.
A lot more. I'm sorry, I've been ignoring the questions. I apologize. The comments here. Hey, it's a Russian name, I think. But so the thing is that like anytime you tell a story, whether it's from the Book of Mormon, from the Torah, the Bible, the anything, historical context matters in that story. So if we can get like that to a place in a historical context, it fills in quite a bit of the story. All right, now I think this is a big one. This is something that so there's different forms of Bible missionaries and signs, right? And different forms of love for the God. And is that what they talk about when they're talking about the iron rod and the river and the tree? These are very symbolic in your doctrine, right? These three things.
Yeah, for sure. So sorry, we're having a little research on the side here, trying to get better answers going on.
Yeah. Sidebar.
Right. But yeah, those three elements that you're talking about. Do you want to bring that up real quick?
Yeah. So one point that was good. That someone who's already here brought up was that
right. It looks like
in the book. Yeah, in the Book of Mormon, at one point it talks about how you can march from one sea to the next sea in the span of a day. And the only place that I can think of is like the Panama, where you're in that narrow piece of land, like on that isthmus. And it, the more I look into it, like it should be Central and South America, parts where because they're always moving. Right. And that's what I think I've heard the most is that they've gone through is South and Central America. But yeah, there definitely are parts like this where, you can get ideas from the context about where they were.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. Yeah. It just fills in the story that, like you said, this is another testament of Jesus Christ, so even the New Testament of Jesus Christ from Matthew to Revelation has historical context, but yet there's still things missing.
Right.
If there wasn't anything missing, there wouldn't be this.
Yeah.
So I think historical context is just as important as the Bible and the Word itself, because it fills in a lot of the stories. You can, you have a story here, the Nephilites. Did I say? Am I getting closer?
You're getting closer. Yeah, there you go. Each time you'll get better. That's all that matters.
Right. It's just repetition. That's all. So they tell the story of the wars and the tribes, but like there's also other things playing a part in all that, that's influencing and stuff like that. So I think it's important to have that. Yeah, real quick, let's take this question before we go to the iron rod. And I wish I could pronounce your name, but the Russian, I'll say, no offense. The Russian asked, do they believe in angels or something like angels?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We believe in angels. We believe in, essentially we believe in a spirit world. And I think we may have touched in on that last week, that after this life, we don't just go straight to heaven, but that we have spirits. And for a period of time before we're judged by God, that we're a spirit and we don't have our body. We get resurrected when we go to heaven and we go to like a glory, and that's when we get our body back. But we do believe that we have angels, and there are times in the Book of Mormon where angels have come down. They've came to talk to prophets like Nephi. But spirits and angels are different. Spirits are just, some people call them like ghosts or whatever. We believe you can be a spirit in the afterlife until you get your body. But yes, there are people who have been visited by angels. Joseph Smith, we believe, was visited by an angel. We believe, in the Book of Mormon, it talks multiple times about people who are visited by angels.
Yeah, if like in the simplest form, I could put it, we believe in sort of like 3 forms of an angel, or 3 types of an angel. I'll try and break them down as quickly and as simple as possible, so as not to make them complicated. You have 2 good types of angels, and then you have an evil angel. Evil angel, obviously, just being those who, like Satan's angels, people who followed Satan, and like evil angels. Just here, they're in spirit, trying to tempt us, corrupt us, make us do wrong. So that's one form. Next, all right, and they don't have bodies; they're just spirit. And then you have angels in the sense that are just spirits, like Elder Murray was saying. They haven't had that resurrected body yet, of flesh and bone, right? But they're still angels. They're still good spirits that help us in everything that we do. And then you have those that are resurrected, angels with resurrected bodies. So they have that flesh and bone. So that's sort of like the main 3, right? You have those evil spirits trying to tempt us the wrong way, and then you have those who have not been resurrected and those who have been resurrected that try and help us, right? Fight that off. So yeah, that's sort of like the basic form of kinds of angels we believe in. So
he has 2 follow-up questions regarding the angels. He says that the crossover interests me with the angels and stuff. So is Moroni an archangel or an angel who might be known by other names?
Yeah, so Moroni, getting closer. Okay. You'll get it one day. Hey,
yeah, well, I'm gonna keep trying and probably get it next.
Yeah, so Moroni, he was an angel, and he came and he visited Joseph Smith because he was the one who hid the golden plates away. He was the last guy to write in the book, right? And he hid the plates away, and so he was the one who had to come back and show Joseph Smith this is where they're at, right? And so he was an angel in that sense. I don't believe there's other names that he's known by. I know like Adam, the first guy on earth, he's also known as Michael, the Archangel Michael.
So that's another question he had that you bring it up. Thank you. The angel crossovers interest me. Is Gabriel, Jabriel, and Gobriel an angel in Mormon religion?
Yeah, so like you have Elijah, and Moses, and even like the Archangel Michael, all those people, right? Elijah and Moses, both people who were taken straight up into heaven, right? They were just translated. They are two also angels, and so the angels of the Bible, we don't completely throw them out. I know there are some religions that have like found certain people in the Bible and that have made them. I don't think we agree 100% with all of them. I might have heard of other angels that I don't know of, but yeah, Michael, he's also in Mormon teachings, right? Adam, that first person, he was known as Michael in the life before that angel. So yeah, we recognize that the stuff in the Bible, right? We believe all that stuff in the Bible as long as it is translated correctly, with its teachings. Yeah, sweet,
good. Thanks for the questions. Good questions, yeah. Right? Okay, so let's just break this down. Let's just start off with the how much time do you guys got? Is there? I know last week you guys had to leave at about an hour.
Yeah, we got like 30 minutes. Yeah.
Okay. So what is the iron rod?
Okay. So the iron rod, where it comes from, at least, the iron rod, what it is, the answer is it's the word of God. But what that comes from is it comes from a dream that Lehi had. And so Lehi, Nephi's dad, while they were traveling through the wilderness, and he's having these prophecies and these dreams about what's best for his family. And one of those dreams specifically is the tree of life. And that also comes in. I think you wrote down a note about like what is the fruit.
Yes. Yep.
And then you say great and spacious building, or did you say great and abominable church?
Said abominable church in the river.
Abominable church. Yeah. I got the abominable church in there in my notes. There's a river. There's a tree.
Mm-hmm.
Jacob, sweet and bitter. I got a lot here.
Right. Yeah. And so to answer the first question, right, because you do got a lot there for us
Yeah.
to unpack. And hopefully we'll get to it all at some point. But the first part, what you're getting at with like the iron rod, the tree, the fruit, the river, that's all part of a vision that we call the tree of life, the vision of the tree of life. And it's one that prophet that we were talking about, Lehi, had towards the beginning of the Book of Mormon. And in this vision, right, he has this experience where he sees this tree far off, and it has this really glowing, precious fruit attached to it. And he's like, wow, when I partake of that fruit, right? It's like the most precious of all fruit. And so he sees before it this iron rod that leads to it. But also surrounded that is all these like obstacles. Like there's a misty darkness where you couldn't see through. There's that dangerous river running across it that if you got swept into, you'd be lost. And then even like a great and spacious building on the side trying to distract you and everything. So there's all these obstacles in the way leading you to that tree.
Does that make sense so far?
So that's like all the elements of that vision. Yeah.
So, but there's meaning behind that too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just, a vision that's,
it's not a cool action sequence, right? Yeah.
So what is the meaning behind this vision?
So, like you talked about that iron rod, and that iron rod that stood there in that darkness, it stands as, we believe, the word of God. Like when there's confusion in this world, there's hard trials, there's things that, maybe it's easy to get lost or get, confused with. We can always have that word of God. And that's the iron rod in this. The iron rod represents something it's going to be straight. It's going to continue. Mega Man. It will always be reliable. And that's what the word of God is. And when you hold on to that iron rod, it leads you to that tree of life, which are those blessings, the greatness, like that amazing fruit. But the other parts of it, the darkness, the mist, the river, those are the things that we get lost in this world. And so, did you guys talk about the great and spacious building yet?
He mentioned it. Yeah, he mentioned it, but we never talked about it.
So you have like the two sides, right? You have, if you follow the iron rod, you'll make it to this tree of life with this fruit and these blessings. If you veer off this iron rod, few things can you talked about the river. There's a really good video that depicts what this vision was like, and people are drowning in the river, falling off the cliff. Some people are holding onto the iron rod, and then some people make it to this great and spacious building. And it's what the great and spacious building represents is like fun. Everyone's having a good time. They're partying, but they're also pointing and laughing at the people who are, trying to make it to this tree of life. And in this vision, what he sees between his sons and his family, because he doesn't just have this vision and see random people, it's his family and the decisions that they make. And so Lehi's son, his youngest son, Nephi, the one who follows God, and his other son, Sam, they follow the iron rod, make it to this tree of life. But Laman and Lemuel, they veer off. They're like, we're not going to the tree. We don't want anything to do with this. And they go to the great and spacious building, and they go off, and they don't want to listen.
Right. It's almost the same. The old saying, "Follow the straight and narrow."
Exactly.
Be on the straight and narrow, and don't deviate from that.
Exactly.
So what does it say what these blessings are that this fruit contains, that the tree of life is?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Lehi has this vision. He tells his family, and Nephi's like, okay, I want to know these things for myself. He's like, I want to be able to experience that, right? And so he prays and asks to understand it. And so what happens is he receives a vision, and he tells us a little bit more detail on what everything means. And the way he puts it is that the fruit of this tree that they partake of is the pure love of Christ. And so in its simplest terms, that's what it is. The partaking of this fruit is the pure love of Christ, which in no otherwise we can put it is receiving the joys and the salvation that comes from following Christ's gospel and the protection that comes from doing that. And so the best part is, it's like once they partook of the fruit, there were some people that even like fell away. There were some people that walked off and joined that building on the side and started to be wicked again. And so it wasn't like, it's not in essence saying, here's the timeline of life. Once you get to the tree, you're done, you're saved. It's more so saying you can get to that tree at any point in your life. And you can taste of the joys of the gospel and the freedom and the love and the peace it brings in your life. But the goal is to hold on to that memory of partaking of that fruit and to endure throughout the rest of your life, not just to stop there, but to continue throughout the rest of your life, holding on to that joy and doing the things to keep it in your life.
Okay. Yes. So essentially I guess the love of God, the tree of life, is essentially the love of God, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. And so could that building be the abominable church? And that
it could be. Yeah, it could be. The way that they break it down in the scriptures is that great and spacious building, as it says, is sort of the world and worldly possessions is what it's broken down as. And what's interesting is that they're like, this great and spacious building is floating in the air. They're like, it's not built on any solid ground, which to me just says, this obstacle has zero foundation. You're building yourself on nothing, right?
Oh.
And so it's like focusing on the worldly things is dangerous in the sense that, one, you're building on nothing because those things mean nothing in the end. And that's sort of the danger of the obstacle. It's like, you don't need to focus on worldly things. You don't need to focus on earthly possessions because in the end, what does it do for you, right? Nothing too much. And so in the vision that building eventually crumbles to the ground and everyone in it's lost because it's like you're built on nothing. In the end, that building will not remain, right? Those worldly possessions will not remain.
Right. Yeah, you can't be buried with them is what they say.
Right.
You can lose them at any time. Yeah. The Russian, I don't know what he says, interesting. So the memory might be a metaphysical reality. The memory, because you say you have to keep a hold of the feeling of the memory.
Mm-hmm.
Is what you when you get to the tree of life.
Yeah, it's because in essence, yeah, it's like it's not gonna happen once, right, in your life where you only get to partake of it once, and it's just like hold on to that moment.
Sure. Yeah,
I kind of say it that way, and that's how it probably came off. But in reality, it's like you want to just stay standing around that tree, inviting others to come, right, and partaking, and then giving them a bite, and then like everyone can share and rejoice in it, in that sense. And so, yeah, it's a memory, but in the sense that you could walk away. It's not like once you have it, you're locked in, you're saved.
And you said that there's people that have partaken the fruit and chose to go to the building or what happened. Yeah.
Other distractions, right, can get in the way still, and those distractions are still there. But it's making sure and keeping your focus right to the preciousness of Christ's love, right. Those distractions will be there, and if you let them win, they'll pull you away. But we want to make sure we stay there, stick around the tree, and continue to feel that love.
Okay. So in the first episode or show or whatever last week, we talked a little bit about the Church of Latter-day Saints was being driven out from New York and Chicago or what have you. And at that time there was a lot of churches on every corner kind of pointing across the street. They're wrong, but essentially they're all preaching the same thing. So I bring that up to ask you what or who or where is the abominable church?
So the abominable church we don't like have like a finger pointed at like a certain church and like, oh, it's
you.
Yeah. It's the great and abominable church is anyone that preaches the word of God without its fullness, but more so, in Joseph Smith, in his account, he describes it really well, but it's churches that, are close. They say that they're close to the word of God with their mouths, but their hearts and their desires may not be there. And it's for churches that aren't the fullness, I guess. It could be any church.
It really comes down to those that are willing to take God's word and add to it or take away from it, right? And present it here to everyone else and say, this is of me, right? Give me gain, right? So it's anything that tampers with God's word as given to us directly in an effort to get their own gain. And there's many instances that you can read about it in the Book of Mormon. But one that my dad has always told me growing up is there are some churches out there, right, where the pastor is paid by the church. Like that's his gig, that's his job. And so if he knew that there was a rich guy in the congregation that came every Sunday and he was paying the most to the church, but he was cheating on his wife, the pastor is not going to preach, don't commit adultery, don't cheat on your wife, and do that, because all of a sudden his paycheck lost so much money.
Well, of course. Yeah.
And so that's part of the concern. It's like they take God's word and they're not willing just to present it as is. They're going to add some to it, or they're going to take away, not teach stuff for their own gain, right? It's for their own purposes. And so that's kind of what it is. It's those churches that are like, we're not going to present it as is. And so, I mean, in our church, all of our leaders, they don't receive monetary compensation for it. They have their own jobs that they're working all the time to provide for their own families. And so when it comes down to it in church, they just present it as is. Like, this is it. If you have a problem with it, fix your life, correct it, and come unto Christ again. And so that's kind of, in its essence, what that great and abominable church is. Those that take that word, manipulate it for their own purposes.
Sure. I guess it could go along the lines of, the same as being like a false prophet in a sense.
Yeah.
So a church with many false prophets maybe, or just, deviating from the word, or just having a bunch of members and even a teacher in the church that, like you said, aren't 100% in it. Their heart ain't there. Their mind ain't there. Their spiritual being ain't there. The willingness to learn and study and preach and teach ain't there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes, and I think we see a lot of that in today's world, to be honest with you, as far as like churches go. So we might as well address it because I'm sure you guys heard a lot about it. The Russian asks, do Mormons generally find some common beliefs Scientologists, or is Scientology nothing like Mormon beliefs and practices? I'm sure you guys kind of hear them arguments from time to time.
I honestly couldn't say enough about Scientologist belief to go super firm one way or another, but like I would have to, because I just haven't learned about it. I don't know. Do you know more about?
So I haven't dug too much into them, but I did. I learned some stuff from one of my high school friends. They told me about it, some of the stuff they believe. They even showed me one of their books and kind of explained some stuff there. And I feel like I know enough to confidently say that we do not believe or we do not have common beliefs with Scientology in that regard. They have their own belief in most things that we don't subscribe to in that sense. But yeah, we don't really, I wouldn't say we're similar.
It's nothing like Scientology.
Yeah, no.
Okay. Yeah. The question will surprise me. I'm sure
Yeah.
heard a lot of things, I mean, even me, I've heard, the Mormonism or Jehovah Witness or, Latter-day Saints or, it's a cult and Scientology, I mean, I'm sure you've heard it before,
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
But Scientology is probably the abominable church, to be honest. So I said it. You guys did it. I said it.
Yeah. It's better that
way. Okay, so this must be something along with the prophets. I have a question here. Well, hold on. Let's stay on the abominable church because I also have a verse, I guess, for you guys.
Yep.
First Nephi 13:6. Nephi. First Nephi.
Yeah.
There it is.
I got it.
You really got to sound these out,
Okay, yeah, I see it. I'll read it out here.
All right.
So it's in First Nephi chapter 13, verse 6. This is what it says. And it came to pass that I beheld this great and abominable church, and I saw the devil, that he was the founder of it. Yeah. And so some of the context that's going on right here in this chapter. So Nephi, his father has said, hey, here's this vision I saw. Nephi's like, okay, I want to be able to experience that too. So Nephi's gone and he asked, and he's prayed to God. He's like, hey, please explain to me some of the things my dad has told me. Like tell me what's going on. And so he receives this vision where an angel comes, right? And he explains to him what his dad saw in that vision. But then he also is like, because of your faith, Nephi, I'm going to show you sort of a little bit of a timeline of the earth and what's going to happen. And so this is part of that timeline that he's seeing kind of. He's like, at this point, I see this great and abominable church. It's coming forth, right, on the land. And he's like, and I see that the devil's over it. And so that's kind of what it's getting at, is that the devil, right, does have power, and he doesn't want Christ's church to win. In the end, right, like the devil's against God, against Christ. And so as long as Christ's church is on the earth, the devil is going to be trying to go against that any way he can. And one of those ways is to have that abominable church, right? Those churches that lead people away, that say, hey, it like dangles a little piece of truth in front of their faces, and then that kind of pulls it away. And it's this whole veil of mystery and just misdirection that he just tries and tricks us with. And so that's why he's like, I saw this great and abominable church over the earth, and Satan was trying to lead it. And that's why, and you might even be able to see it these days, is it's this danger that we're coming about, is that the prophecies are kind of saying that the evil in the world is going to grow and progress and become greater and greater throughout time, and it's just going to become worse and worse. And so that's what it's saying, is that this great abominable church is going to spread and it's going to expand also, and at the head of it is Satan, right, doing those evil stuff. And so that's what it's saying here, is like that church isn't just going to be a blimp on the radar. It's going to grow and spread and try and do the most it can, right? But God's work is never going to be frustrated, and in the end, God won't lose because He's God, right?
We've already determined God don't die. Last discussion here, yeah. So
exactly.
So the Satan, or the devil, is the head of this church. That's basically, I mean, that's coming to rival or try to make it so that the church of God, the church of Son of God, don't rise up and spread the word. Man, there's so many churches that come to mind when there really is. I mean, because and the thing is that, the more teachings, the more verses, the more, Christian sects or whatever, it seems like the more the waters get muddied in a sense, because there's so much different interpretations. And when if you want to break that down in biblical wisdom, the devil is full of confusion. I mean, that's its whole purpose, is to confuse. It's really interesting to see. And then, you think of the tentacles of the octopus or the heads of the hydra, just kind of slowly creeping on, everybody with the confusion that is setting in and being spiritually bankrupt in a sense, What you guys want to do one more? We got about 6 minutes.
Sure. Yeah, let's do it.
One more. Okay, so this one I think it might have something to do with the prophets, maybe not, but the question that I have 20 years ago says, how does the bishop know who needs help and who does not?
Okay.
It's a great question.
So my dad back at home, he's a bishop. I'm a bishop's son.
Really?
And yeah, so I see the oh yeah. No, so I see the inner workings of the bishop, and kind of know how it goes on a little bit. And that's a good question because the church does have so many resources and so many means of helping people out. Just with, I think we're like one of the only churches that have a mean of making food. Like we have our own in Salt Lake. They produce food. They have a bread, like literally like anything. They make food.
Like at the local Salvation Army here, we do service. A lot of the food they hand out, you check on the back, and it's got our church little stamp on the back there. Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I didn't even. So you guys have like a big old, kitchen factory and pumping out food and bakery. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Didn't know that. Yeah, didn't know that at all.
Canned foods, grain, literally everything. It's amazing. But
tell about Welfare Square.
Yeah, that's what it's called. Welfare Square.
Welfare Square. Okay. Yeah. Where's the pen?
Write it down. There you go.
Go on down there.
Welfare Square.
Mm-hmm.
Did your dad come up with that name or?
No, not my dad. No, but my dad did what he ended up doing with a lot of people is there are a lot of people who need things. And, there are people who come to the church just for the reason of they need things, which is okay. Like we understand people are needy and we're not just holding it over their head. Like, hey, we have to be, a good member if you want this stuff. But, bishops, they do meet with families. They meet with them as often as they can just to check in with them and their needs and are open with them because they know that they can get help from the church. And the church, for the most part, is extremely generous with that. But they do usually at, the discretion at a few people. They want to make sure they're not doing it for the right reasons and not just like stealing from the church and trying to take it other places. But they really are just getting it for the help.
Can you tell them about the church part?
Yeah, and so that's the other thing. The bishops, he's the local leader for that ward, and he's given, he has a responsibility to help them, right, to guide them. But like he doesn't want people to come in and abuse what the church can do and just abuse all the resources we have. And so he is given, special responsibility. With that responsibility comes, responsibility that God acknowledges that he's like, hey, that's a responsibility. He's going to help him. So he is given like the spirit of discernment, right? That spirit of deciding who needs it. And so he receives inspiration. He receives inspiration. He receives revelation on what he thinks should happen. A lot of times he might go and pray about it. He's like, do they need it? Does so-and-so need it? How can I best help the ward? And so a lot of that comes down to what God tells him, the inspiration he receives, the revelation he receives to help, do that in the best way he can.
It's interesting that you brought up, and I'm making a note of this, and maybe we'll talk about it a little bit next week, if you guys are up for it. But a lot of the church, I guess, is through prayer, and in essence, prayer becomes feeling, and feeling can almost become like an intuition. You can't really explain what something inside of you is true, but it's true. You just can't prove it to be true. That would be my definition of intuition. And I think a lot of intuition is integrated into the Latter-day Saints prayers and feelings and how they base their actions or behaviors through. But I do think that this was a great place to stop. Explaining a little bit about the big heart that the Latter-day Saints has in helping the community and helping people and having the resources to do so, and the bishops helping people. I think this is a great way to end it, and hopefully we'll see you guys next week if you're up to it.
For
maybe,
sure.
maybe without as many sidebars, who knows? But we all need a Kit Kat sometimes, you know. So, yeah. All right. Well, thanks to all the viewers, the comments, the questions. They were great questions. Thanks, you guys, for coming in, taking the time to answer the questions, and just having a discussion with me and everybody that's listening that might be interested in the Latter-day Saints doctrine. So I really appreciate this. All right, you guys, come back hopefully next week with you guys. We'll keep you informed, and y'all have